Our next topic today is alfalfa weed control. And there's more to it than just controlling the weeds out there, so we're going to discuss a number of things here with alfalfa. The thing I'm most excited about, Darren, is they finally got Roundup alfalfa approved again.
Well, you know, Roundup Ready alfalfa has been a hot topic in the legal system, unfortunately. You know, it's one that was labeled and then all of a sudden a court ruled that it shouldn't have been.
Well, it was ridiculous. I mean, one guy is protesting this, and so all the data that was done for years gets thrown out and they have to redo everything. Why? Why? You just wasted millions and millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money. It was a waste of time. And then in the end they find out, oh, I guess it is safe. Well, yeah, we knew that 3 years ago.
Well, it is a little bit frustrating. You wonder why we have our governmental agencies that do all the research on this stuff, and then we don't agree with them when they're done. It's kind of tough. So when it comes to Roundup Ready alfalfa, yes, weed control becomes a little easier when you can spray Roundup post-emerge. And the reason why, we're talking about a perennial crop here. When you plant alfalfa, you're putting it out there not just thinking, well, I'm going to have a great stand this year, but you're thinking, I want to have a great stand next year and the year after and maybe even the year after that. Now, I know there's some guys that like to plant alfalfa and leave it forever, or at least 7 or 10 years. I think that's a little crazy. If you want to get the best out of an alfalfa stand, after about 3 or 4 years, it's given you the best that it can. Well, let's talk about weed control. And when we think about these perennial crops, you've got to start before you're even planting.
So our number one suggestion with alfalfa is to go out pre-emerge before you ever seed the alfalfa and put down Eptam. Eptam is basically the old Eradicane, if you remember that from years ago, Eradicane without the corn safener. It's a fantastic product on a number of broadleaf weeds and grasses. It even has activity on some of the tough grasses like quackgrass and wild oats. It's not perfect, but at least it's going to hold everything back and allow your alfalfa to get a real nice start.
The other pre that a lot of guys have used over the years has been Treflan, and you can use that at a reduced rate in alfalfa. The problem is, well, there's two problems. One, if you cut the rate on Treflan, the weed control is not that good. And when you're planting a perennial crop like alfalfa, you've got to have great weed control so you have a great stand the first year. Otherwise, if you don't get a good stand established, it's not like more alfalfa is magically going to appear. You've got a poor stand forever if you don't get a good stand right away. Now, in terms of weed control, it's just not that good. But in terms of hurting the alfalfa, too strong a rate of Treflan can definitely do that. I would avoid Treflan. I'd stay with the Eptam pre-emerge.
Okay, the main products you're going to use, or at least think about using post-emerge, would be Pursuit, Buctril, Butarac, and then one of the grass killers like Select Max. So to start with on that grass killing side, oftentimes we have problems with some of the foxtails. Well, that's no big deal to control with Select Max. But occasionally you'll see quackgrass in your alfalfa. If you have that, you need to run with a maximum labeled rate of Select Max. And remember, quackgrass is a perennial, so even a good strong shot of Select Max or any other grass killer, it's probably not going to be perfect, but at least you're going to get it suppressed. Turning to those broadleaf products, Pursuit is still a good product. Yes, there are a few weeds that have developed tolerance or resistance to Pursuit, like water hemp, for example, or kochia, but Pursuit does control a wide variety of weeds that we often see in alfalfa. Now, you can run out there with something like Buctril, which is less expensive than Pursuit would be, and it does do a nice job on cockleburr, sunflower, lamb's quarters, but it's not nearly as broad spectrum as what Pursuit is. And finally, with Butarac, that's 2,4-DB. I don't ever like to see 2,4-D on any crop like alfalfa. There's a chance that it's going to ding that alfalfa up a little bit, but if, let's say, you've got dandelions out there, what else are you going to do than do some kind of Buctril-Butarac combination and hope for the best? With dandelions, you can't get perfect control with any product out there, and that's the reason why Roundup is in such high demand from alfalfa producers.
Like you say, there's some of those weeds you really can't get in crop in alfalfa, so we've got to do something like dormant crop spraying. So you wait till that alfalfa goes dormant in the fall, and then you try and get out there and kill some weeds before that crop gets growing actively again in the spring. There are a couple of products here like Sencor and Velpar that fit the bill for a number of different weed species that could pop up in alfalfa. Again, this one you've got to time it just right. If that alfalfa is actively growing, you can really ding it.
Yeah, but here's the problem. I think you're going to ding it all the time. I mean, I know guys will use these products, but honestly, if you've got so many dandelions that you think you need to use Velpar or Sencor, it's time to rip the stand up, in my opinion. Okay, you've got to do everything you possibly can to manage that stand before it gets that far gone that you think you need to use one of these products. So what we always say with any crop production is crop canopy is the very best weed killer that you can possibly get. So in other words, besides talking about herbicides and what we're going to use here on alfalfa to control weeds once they're up, let's do everything we can to raise a great alfalfa crop. Look at all the different nutrients you need. Make sure you have great insect control. I mean, just do everything possible to raise a great crop, and that alfalfa can choke out a lot of weeds throughout the course of the year.
So it's really important with alfalfa. Don't think of it as, well, I'm going to get a good stand established and then I'll fertilize once a year. I'll maybe spray it once a year. That's not what alfalfa is all about. You're taking multiple cuttings out there. You have to analyze things again. Once you take that cutting off, are there insects out there? How can I get some fertility out there? Many growers now are putting on some liquid fertility. That way it's highly available to restart that crop so we can get that canopy going as fast as possible. And you have to remember bugs too.
Yeah, so in other words, if you intensively manage your alfalfa, it can produce a tremendous amount of tonnage. But you have to manage it. Every time you're taking that cutting, you've got to look at, am I timing the cutting right? Am I getting my application on a fertilizer, an insecticide at the right time? Manage it well, and that alfalfa stand will treat you well over time.
One of the weeds that can be difficult to control on alfalfa is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?